Most people who look rich are not rich, and most people who are actually rich do not look rich. That single sentence, backed by decades of financial research, might be the most important money lesson nobody teaches you in school. We live in a world where the appearance of wealth has become almost completely detached from actual wealth, and that gap is costing ordinary people hundreds of thousands of dollars over a lifetime. Here is the cruel irony at the heart of modern money culture. The signals we have been trained to read as markers of financial success, the luxury car, the designer clothes, the expensive watch, are more often signs of someone who is very good at spending money rather than building it. A landmark long term study of American millionaires, published by researchers Thomas Stanley and William Danko, found that the majority of people with genuinely high net worth live in modest homes, drive ordinary cars, and are almost invisible to the outside world. Meanwhile, the people visibly performing wealth in their neighborhoods are statistically far more likely to be living paycheck to paycheck. So, why do we keep falling for it? Why do we keep stretching our budgets to buy things that signal a financial status we have not actually earned? The answer goes deep into human psychology, deep into our evolutionary wiring, and deep into a consumer economy that profits every single time you confuse the costume of wealth with the real thing. Over the next few minutes, we are going to pull that illusion apart layer by layer, and what you find underneath might completely change how you think about every purchase you make. To understand why status spending has such a powerful grip on us, you have to go back a very long time, long before credit cards, long before shopping malls, long before money even existed. Human beings are deeply social animals. For most of our evolutionary history, your position in the group determined your survival. Higher status meant better access to food, mates, and protection. Lower status meant you were expendable. So our brains developed an almost obsessive sensitivity to social ranking. We are hardwired to notice where we stand relative to the people around us, and we are hardwired to do something about it when we feel we are falling behind. Researchers call this phenomenon social comparison theory, first formally described by psychologist Leon Festinger in 1954. The idea is simple. We evaluate our own social and economic position not in absolute terms, but relative to the people we compare ourselves with. In other words, it is never really about how much you have. It is about how much you have compared to your neighbors, your co-workers, your social feed. This is why a salary that would feel extraordinary in one social context can feel embarrassing in another. And this is exactly the psychological mechanism that consumer advertising has been ruthlessly exploiting for over a century. In 1913, an advertising executive named Ernest Elmo Calkins wrote that the goal of modern advertising was not just to sell a product, but to make people feel their current possessions were inadequate. That strategy never stopped working. Every luxury brand, every status product, every aspirational lifestyle sold online today is built on the same ancient instinct, the fear of being seen as low status. The purchase does not fill a practical need, it fills an emotional wound. Let us talk about real numbers, because the actual financial cost of status spending across a lifetime is staggering and most people never sit down to calculate it. Take the average new luxury vehicle. In many countries, the monthly payment alone runs between $800 and $1,200. Over a 5-year loan, that is between $48,000 and $72,000 spent just on the payment, not counting insurance premiums that run significantly higher for luxury models, not counting the accelerated depreciation that causes some luxury vehicles to lose 30 to 40% of their value in the first 3 years. Now consider what that same stream of money would look like redirected, even at a modest historical growth rate, money consistently invested rather than spent on status goods compounds into genuinely life-changing sums over 2 or 3 decades. The car does not compound, the watch does not compound, the designer outfit does not compound. They depreciate, they wear out, and within a remarkably short time, they provide almost no emotional benefit at all, a phenomenon psychologists call hedonic adaptation. Research published in the Journal of Consumer Psychology found that the emotional boost from a status purchase typically fades within weeks, sometimes days. So you are left with the financial damage, but almost none of the psychological reward. And here is the piece that makes it even more painful. Status spending is often invisible to the person doing it. When researchers ask people why they bought a luxury item, the most common answers involve quality, durability, or personal taste. Almost nobody says they bought it to impress other people, even when the data clearly shows that social visibility is the dominant driver. We are remarkably good at hiding our real motivations from ourselves. So, if looking wealthy and being wealthy are so disconnected, what does genuine wealth actually look like in practice? The research paints a remarkably consistent picture, and it is far less glamorous than any advertisement would have you believe. In Stanley and Danko's research, which involved surveying thousands of high net worth households across the United States, the typical millionaire drove a used or modestly priced vehicle, had lived in the same house for over a decade, shopped for discounts, and spent far less per year on clothes, watches, and dining than people in similar income brackets who had almost nothing saved. The technical term the researchers used was prodigious accumulator of wealth, as opposed to an under accumulator of wealth. The difference between the two was almost never income level, it was the percentage of income retained and allowed to grow. This same pattern shows up across cultures and time periods. Warren Buffett, one of the wealthiest people in human history, still lives in the Omaha home he purchased in 1958 for $31,500. He has spoken openly about the fact that the house has met his needs perfectly. That is not false modesty. It reflects a fundamentally different relationship with money than most people have. For someone genuinely focused on building wealth, a purchase only makes sense if the value it delivers exceeds what that money would produce left to work over time. That calculation almost always makes status purchases look terrible. Real wealth is quiet, patient, and almost deliberately invisible. It is the gap between what you earn and what you spend, multiplied by time. Every dollar that stays invested is working. Every dollar spent on signaling status is working for someone else. Here is the good news, and there genuinely is good news. The status spending loop is not unbreakable. It is a conditioned response, and conditioned responses can be interrupted with the right awareness and the right tools. The first and most powerful step is something behavioral economists call reframing the reference group. Remember, our brains measure status relative to the people around us. If your reference group is built around visible consumption, you will always feel behind, no matter how much you earn. But if you consciously shift your comparison point toward people who measure success by financial security, time freedom, and optionality rather than visible goods, the psychological math completely changes. This is not theoretical. Studies have found that people who live in communities or social networks where frugality is normalized report the same levels of life satisfaction as people in high consumption environments while building wealth dramatically faster. A second practical tool is what financial educators call the 30-day rule for non-essential purchases. When the urge to buy something for status arises, you note it down and wait 30 days. In the vast majority of cases, the emotional urgency dissolves entirely. The thing that felt essential was actually the status signal you needed in a moment of social anxiety, not a genuine need. Third, and perhaps most importantly, replace the signal with a story you tell yourself privately. Real wealth does not need an audience. The most powerful financial move you can make is becoming comfortable with being financially invisible while your actual net worth grows quietly in the background. That is the real game, not looking rich, being free. If this video shifted the way you think about money, please like it and subscribe, because every week we break down another fascinating truth about how wealth actually works, and you will not want to miss what is coming next.